Ready whenever you are. We're live.
6 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. The Open Meetings Act is posted on the wall. Roll call.
Buckminster.
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Foraker.
Here.
Castor.
Here.
Frank Killingsworth.
Here.
Kenny Killingsworth. Layden.
Here.
Reese.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor's report, all I got is citywide cleanup. It was a big success counting the recyclable stuff, metal. We, somewhere in the area, 25 to 30 tons we hauled off that day. City administrator's report.
All right, I don't have anything specific for this meeting. We got a lot of items to roll through, so I'll have a full report next meeting.
I don't have anything.
We're going to regular business, discussion and action, agenda approval.
So make a motion to approve.
Second.
All vote.
8 yeas.
Discussion and action, minutes approval for April 21st, 2025.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Who's not second? Frank.
Frank, all vote.
8 yeas.
Discussion and action, claims approval for May 6th, 2025.
Report was provided. Invoices are all sitting here if there's any questions.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All vote.
8 yeas.
Discussion and action, monthly report from the Southeast Nebraska Land Bank.
Minutes were provided for that. Essentially, they did not have a meeting for the month of April, which is what's shown by the minutes. So there's no true report for that, but they submit a monthly report no matter what to be compliant with their state statute.
Motion to approve. Second.
Vote.
8 yeas.
This time we'll have a public hearing, application for an animal permit to pasture or stable, a total of 6 equines at 1215 East 17th Street, Levi Jones.
Levi, you want to talk about what you're doing or anything?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's, as some of you may know, my dad and I have a fuel business. So I'm just asking that I just bought this property next to mine. It's over on by the nursing home on the edge of town over there. I'd basically just be wanting to graze a few head there from time to time and be able to ride them close to my house. Our business is basically training and selling saddle mules, so riding and grazing, I guess, would be my reason for wanting this permit there.
You have a permit on your adjacent property, right?
Yes.
Your old house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The last owners had permits there too, I believe, didn't they?
Yes, very much.
This is new, but it's just adjoining.
Right.
It's the one that we're gonna,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Motion to approve. Oh, I gotta come out of the-
Yep, didn't hear any, sorry. Any other public comment?
Any other public comment? That's Gable. Public hearing's closed.
Okay.
Move on to 6, discussion and action, application for an animal permit to pasture and stable, a total of 6 equines at 1215 East 17th Street.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All vote.
8 yeas.
7, discussion and action. Request to allow alcohol to be served at the Pritchard Auditorium on Saturday, June 21st, 2025 for a wedding.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Vote.
8 yeas.
Discussion. Recent power outages and public inquiries regarding electrical service reliability.
Alright, I provided a written report, kind of just trying to get a little more transparency out on outages that we have, reliability, kind of root cause analysis that Trevor and the power plant team go through. Kind of background on the outages between April 22nd to 24th. We didn't have any public comments that were submitted, or not public comments, you mean a publication that we were having an outage, or scheduling an outage. And that was due to OPD having a scheduled outage on transmission. Under normal cases, we pop in generation with that, and nobody sees the difference there. There's no blips, there's no issues to do that. However, the first day, April 22nd, we ran through, went off a transmission service at 6 a.m., ran to, I think, 12 p.m. that night, or midnight. So it's scheduled between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. Ran for that full day. Nobody knew anything. Power plant crew did their work. We ran on self-generation and switched back over to transmission power that evening. However, on the next day, that's when we started to run into problems. On the 23rd, around 1:40 p.m., that's when engine 8 went offline. Had some high cylinder temperatures on 2 cylinders. And ended up tripping a breaker through the protection devices that are in there. It did subsequently drop the entire town out of power since it tripped that breaker out. Engine 7 was already down for maintenance from a few weeks prior to that, when OPPD's poles went down on the highway. I guess it was probably more than a few weeks. Prior to that, when they had that storm event, I think they dropped 12 or 15 poles. Engine 7's the unit that was operating at that point in time. It had some turbo oil issues, some oil lubrication issues within it, so that unit couldn't be ran up. 9 was offline for some issues with the voltage controls within it, so we had to get some work done, get those engines up. In the meantime, they got some of the legacy engines pulled up, our older units, to get a few of the circuits turned on, but didn't get the entire town turned on. The power plant team called OPPD. We were scheduled to go through 10 o'clock that night, said, hey, we can't get back where we're at, can we shorten the outage on the day? They allowed that, or was okay with that, and we went back on transmission service on the 23rd. Worked on engine 9 throughout the evening, got the control system bypassed. We borrowed a charger system from OPPD, went and got it, hooked it up, got it running, fired up engine 9, ran it that evening for a period of time, said, all right, we should be good to go. Called OPPD and we kept on schedule with that next day outage. It wasn't a 6 a.m. we went back on. Engine 9 was operating. Then around 7 o'clock, we had auxiliary air control issues that ended up tripping out. Then we didn't have 8 to fall back on. We didn't have engine 7 to fall back on. So, smaller engines couldn't run the entire town. 3, 4, and 5 don't have enough to get us through without one of those 3. Subsequently called OPPD and we went back on transmission service at 8 o'clock. So that's kind of the breakdown of where we were at. I kind of wrote that into the corrective actions that were within the report. They do have engine 8. We did a scheduled outage last week to do testing on that. When they put the automation controls in that engine, there was never really a full black start outage ran. It was apparently proposed, but just not completed on the city side of things. So we talked to Farabee that did the work on it. They said, yeah, if we can get a schedule, let's do it. We can check the parameters. That's the only real time frame that we can get it done. So we coordinated that, had that scheduled out. He put all the information out to get it done. We were down, I think, 30 minutes. Got the control issues all fixed, hammered out, did some adjustments on those controls, and ran for about an hour and a half on generation, then switched back over to transmission service. In the meantime, we're working on engine 7 to get it repaired. Did some replacement on some oil filters, few things to see if that would diagnose the lube oil issue, which luckily seems like it has fixed that problem. There's other work and preventive maintenance work that needs done, but essentially we have engine 7, engine 8 back in operation. Engine 9 is still in limited service, pending some capacitors for some air controls, and whatever happens with that engine, every time we run it, there seems to be a problem. I think we've had Wärtsilä on this year on site probably 3 different times to work with something, a part that we've replaced that they gotta get in and do the controls on. We don't have access to all that system, to set those parameters. So they come in and do that, we get her running, run for the day or run for half a day, or 4 hours, I say half a day, half of a work schedule day. Runs great, next day, we need it, we have another issue. So consistently keep having multiple issues on 9 that we're gonna have to hatch out. There's different service agreements, different pieces we can put in place with Wärtsilä, but we gotta see if that's viable or not. So, right now we have 7 and 8, those 2 together with the other engines can run town without an issue. Majority of the time, we're 6 to 9 megawatts, we can easily run that. When we're at about 15 at our peak load, that's when we need a little more support, if we don't have transmission support at all.
Is there any issues with engine 9 that, like a preventative maintenance schedule would catch, or is it truly just things, I mean, there's no foresight to anything, it just breaks? Or is there things that we could catch if we did a little bit more thorough? Or do we know?
Yeah, I would say, yes, there's some components that, need to be on a more routine schedule. Historically, there hasn't been preventive maintenance done, or not a standard amount to keep that reliability where it's at. Trevor's working with the power plant team to kind of develop those schedules, even on the old engines. The run schedule is kind of the main thing that Trevor implemented to try to get moving, to find all those problems. You know, at least exercise these engines. Wärtsilä probably should have been on an exercise plan when it was first put in. They're not made, an engine's not made to just sit and not do anything. So it needs to lubricate bearings, get oil where it needs to go, and find all those little problems here and there. You don't find them unless they're running. So, but ideally, you have a backup engine. If you start having issues with one, you can bring engine, 7 on and not have to trip out. You take that load, move it over there, take engine 9 out, next day go and do your work that you need to do. So that's kind of the idea of having our RICE compliant engines, which are 7, 8, and 9. We gotta get those 5, 9 reliable. So, 99.999 reliable. They're our backup to our entire operation, We're a single transmission feed into town. If we don't have that, or if we're curtailed, those are the engines that we need. Between those 3, at least one to do the job for that day. Not too often are we running 3 days in a row. A lot of times we're just running a little 2-hour window or 4-hour window here and there, shaving off high power or high price points on the day. If OPD happens to be down for some component or needs some support assistance somewhere, then our transmission will be off. So we need to develop that plan, Buck. I mean, a full preventive maintenance schedule.
No, I get it, and I understand that, I just wasn't sure if engine 9 is the problem child, then maybe if we need to put a little bit more attention to it,
It's our newest engine, went in 2017, and I think our engine 8 is way more reliable than that at this point.
Feel like they used to be type thing.
There's a lot of controls within it that have issues.
If you guys want, you can get I talked to the other plant there, and they'll give, every year we do LCOs on diesels, just like preventive maintenance stuff. If you wanted help, they would give you, they look at the procedures aids up there, what they do preventive maintenance wise, and I could bring them, and you guys look at them and just kind of go through what they do, then if that's something that would be, that would help.
The trouble is, this number 9 is the only one like it in the United States. Now, he told me there's more coming now, right now, but up till this date, it's been the only one. So it's
I'm just saying if there's like any kind of anything that would help, I would be more than willing to.
On our older engines, they're all have their own different schedules, but they're tanks that have been in place for in other municipalities for quite some time. Mean does some of that for all their entities. We're only a partial member of Mean, so we don't go into their run schedules, but there's stuff that we can mock to do that. Trevor should have came in and should have been able to be handed the operation manual, you know, and we don't have that. So
And I think
we
that's
gotta
what-
develop that.
That's kind of what Frank's offered you is a manual that has a lot of what you should be checking, what should be being tested as well. Just ideas.
We're gonna need to make it specific for the engines we have.
Yeah, this is
Likely
just
need to
additional
get
information.
Farabee or other entities in and consultant service to really work through that whole plant. Cause it's not only just the preventive maintenance on the engine, there's maintenance on that side, and configurations that need done. It's just years and years of, you know, you can kind of look at the history down there, you can look at what engine went in and, well, we added on to the power plant, so we put in a 1930 engine, we added on again in 1940, we added on again in 1960, and 1980. So it just kind of sequentially went down, the path, and we've got to pull up the full plan to get that done, and it's gonna take more than me and Trevor putting our heads into getting that developed.
Was there, back when they put that in, wasn't there some employees, I mean, I was told there's some employees that got sent to Florida to learn how to maintenance that and run it and that. Do we still have a couple of them on the department?
I believe Robert, our power plant manager, would have been at least one of those. Scott may have been, Scott just retired.
I don't know, I just heard there was two that was on there, I didn't know if they were any help with this or not, or just, but he.
I don't know who all went down to that one. And they did, unfortunately, when they went down to that, they hadn't even installed the engine in or anything, so
Nothing to look at.
the timing wasn't the best in how that implemented. It sounded like there was supposed to be some additional on-site training too at the end of the project that didn't get completed, as part of that scope, or got overlooked somewhat. But that's Wardzilla's, they're kind of seaboard wherever they're at, cause there are a lot of those engines are used a lot on ships more than they're sitting in a.
Yeah, I think didn't Dave Aiken go over there when they did all this?
I would say Dave was probably,
Yeah,
Dave
I
would have
thought
been
he
at the
went
power
over there
plant
when
then,
Where we got it from.
yeah.
I think he went over and, I thought he did anyway.
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 went through the Wardzilla, training on it. So, but that's just the basic operation. That's not going through and doing all
Overhaul it.
the overhaul work and what needs to be done with those. That's kind of just a general overview of, here's this engine, here's how it basically operates, and here's the controls that are in place for it.
So do we need to get guys down there to get trained on them, to work on them?
We could find somebody to get here to train them.
Either way, I mean,
That's what he just said.
I think
with
Can
Wardzilla,
Can Barbie do that? Train them?
On the Wardzilla, no.
I didn't.
Farabee doesn't touch the Wardzilla. We have that local resource, I mean, they're out of Hickman, they're a
Right,
big
yeah.
firm, they go all across the
World.
world, for their work, but they don't touch those commodes, they're our old dual fuel Coopers and those engines.
so we'll bring guys in and train our guys in, we're saying we'll have them down here.
There's some different scenarios that we can put together, we're gonna have to bring those to council. I mean,
Okay.
it's not so much the training, like I said, we've had them on site here multiple times this year. Board of Public Works has spent probably around like $60,000 probably this year, between probably this year and last year, for work that had to be done. You get them here, it's $10,000 just to get them here to start with. And Candido's the dude, he's the man that kind of runs around for them, and he's the one that put in our engine, most of the work. I mean, he's usually the one that comes back to do the controls and this, what needs to be done. They've done a basic, they had him here for, I think, the second time we had him back for repairs. They did like a 2 or 3 day little training components, for some of the new power plant team, just so they could have an understanding, kind of like what they would have done in Florida on site here. So we have that. The main issue is just all these ancillary components that go with it. It's not the engine, it's the ancillary components that have failure pieces. So, we have a team that can diagnose that. Nathan's a great addition down there, Sepron. He's a relays guy and a electronics guy, he can go through that, diagnose all those things, figure out what they are, and get the parts in, we can fix them, but when we fix them, we've gotta get Wardzilla in to hook into the system and do those extra controls, so we can do contracts to let them remote in, you know, there's contracts to do that, they're, you know, starting at $8,000 a month to do that. Or you can do them on a one-off kind of basis when you need them here and there. But folks are gonna need to do something moving forward with it.
Yeah.
By remote, you mean that they can, from another location, can tell you what's going wrong with it before it goes
Potentially
wrong?
what may be having issues, what air codes, what it's tripping out on, probably preventive maintenance schedules, there's components that can probably be done with that. If we do a repair, they should be able to remote into that system then and actually do the controls that would need to be done with that repair, off-site rather than on-site.
Is that kind of what their older engines, they're getting monitored, aren't they, by them in Hickman? I mean, they watch the code?
No, they're not. They don't remote into Engine 8's the only one we automated. That was starting right when I came in 21, I think they started that project. We finished it in late 22 or early 23.
So they monitor engine 8 then?
We do all the,
Oh, you do.
Can't they do it go up there?
so,
They want to.
They just come and fix
no,
it.
they're not patched into it.
Oh, I didn't.
Right now, they come into it. We have all the systems in that. There's some parameters, some different controls that are proprietary to Farabee, because that automation we put on 8 is just a proprietary thing for Farabee. That's their engineering and design work. But they can go in and set those, and we can see those codes to figure out what those are, but there's a bunch of them. I mean, they can set a whole bunch of parameters, and not even all of them were set. And what we had to do with that testing was change out some vector controls within there and open some parameters up, because they were too tight, and essentially they were tripping out the breaker rather than the engine. You know, it killed the whole engine, and it wasn't supposed to do that. So they had to come in and do that adjustment when they were on site to get that opened up.
Trevor's gonna give field trips and tours so people understand how complicated the system is down there. It isn't just pushing a couple buttons.
Anyone, you're welcome to come down whenever and show you what's going on. Each engine individually and what the nuances are. I mean, you're basically looking at a old 1940s coupe compared to a 2024 Tesla. I mean, and you gotta know how to work on all of them. I mean, some of it you computer, some of it you don't, and it's a vast amount of knowledge that you need, and you got a lot of turnover down there. You know, part of the changing the staffing schema down there was to try to get people to want to go there and stay there rather than the 24/7 that scared people away. We're 5/8 down there now, and now big focus is to start running them engines on a routine basis. Number one, the engines need exercise. Two, our operators need the familiarity of how the engines feel, sound, smell, taste, you know, whatever. You don't get that experience without just doing it. And there's a lot of nuances with each engine, and also understanding the systems. A lot of stuff's been cross-tied, added onto. There's no plans you can pull up and show you exactly what needs to be done. It's all gotta be invented, and then you're trying to invent it with new staff. We're starting from scratch. We got a huge amenity down there that we need to take advantage of and capitalize on, but it's gonna take some time to work out some of the kinks, and like that issue that Anthony was talking about with some of the programming on Engine 8, that's been going on for 3 years. And I think we fixed it in 30 minutes with the planned outage. Every time that engine would fault, like a DTC on your pickup, you'd kill it, and that DTC would go away. So you'd have no idea what just happened. There was no indication to us what was happening with that engine. It reset itself. And that's why every one of these outages we've had, people's lights flicker and et cetera. It's due to that engine kind of ramping up and then dying, and ramping up and dying. And knock on wood, I think
You can't clear the codes, you gotta.
well, it automatically clear the codes. That's why it let us start it up again, but then it would dump again. And we were led on a wild goose chase, and I believe we corrected one of the big issues we've been having with that engine ever since it was automated. Which, you know, time will tell. We tested it for quite some time Friday morning, and feel pretty good about it right now. Engine 9's got some DC voltage issues that need to be looked at. Some instrument error issues that need to be looked at. Engine 7's oil filters looked like it had pond sludge in them. You know, I think that contributed to some of the low turbo lube oil pressure issues that we were having. We opened up the strainer and filters. We put all new filters in, $5,000 in filters, and washed with diesel and scrubbed and shop vac, and the guys did down there and got it cleaned up. And when we ran it Friday, it appears that our lube oil pressure came back. Now we fixed that problem. Now we're finding sand in some of our cooling water. So we have some cooling issues that we got to figure out. Somehow we're getting sand into the system, into our raw water. Don't know how, don't know why. But now we got to troubleshoot that, which is going to require draining all the cooling water out of those engines, which means those engines are not going to be available while we're doing that troubleshooting. It's one thing after another down there, and it's just going to take time, and we're going to have to pick a system and go through it and figure these things out. So.
Have we ever just like got an estimate from somebody, just come in and say, this is what's gonna take to get it up to work, up to grade?
That's what Anthony and I's plan is. We're gonna try to
Might be
get
worth doing, just,
someone in here and start, cause our guys can only do so much.
Right.
You know, they're busy doing
Right.
stuff down there, so, but we need to also help them so they can.
it'd be worth spending the money to get some in and say, what's it
Absolutely,
gonna
I
take
mean,
to?
those conversations are already happening, and we'll be bringing it to the board and to council sooner than later to navigate some of that stuff.
It's not as simple as like a dent in a car.
Right, I
You
know,
know, we're gonna have to have an entity come in, it's probably gonna have to be potentially multiple that come in and look at it from an engineering standpoint and also from a mechanical standpoint and get those kind of two expertise groups together. Not gonna be able to walk in and say,
Yeah.
well, it's gonna cost you $50,000
Yeah.
to do this.
it'd be worth doing though, I think.
It's likely gonna have to be put together, and have and hopefully an idea of what dollars are,
Yeah.
but we need to associate something and put that
Right.
together, and then we can then potentially utilize that same group to help us develop that operational plan that we would need in those preventive maintenance schedules out of that.
That's a good idea to get that done.
Well, that's where those run schedules will help too,
Right.
getting more regular hours put
Yes.
into them to identify it, so.
Just like a school bus or whatever, you know, right in the summertime, once in a while, just to keep them going and.
I think Andy had something to.
Yeah.
And
So I just wanted to ask, what do you mean appears the oil pressure come back? Either it did or it didn't, it should be pretty obvious.
It was obvious. We ran it for an hour and a half and it was good.
But you said appeared.
Yeah, the gauge showed that it was, the operating pressure was there, and next time we run it, I hope it's also there. I hope we cleaned out the filters good enough that blockage doesn't occur in one of the turbo lube lines. It's the size of your pinky. The main lube oil lines are about 2.5 inch pipe to the engine. They share a combined reservoir with the engine crankcase oil is the same oil as the turbo lube oil. There's two turbos, there's multiple 1/2 inch
No, I
lines.
get it, I'm a mechanic. I'm just, your words were misleading, like appeared. Like either it was there or it wasn't, at the time you tested it.
Yeah, my operators told me that the pressure was there. There was
Okay.
no alarm on, so
Okay.
not knowing that we would put it through any real paces by no means, but we cleaned the filter and the pressure was there.
There.
That's what I guess I mean by it appears. It
You're-
appears that
What you meant is you hope it
I
maintains.
hope the solution, I hope what we did
Fix that
fix the problem, but I couldn't sit here and tell
Yep.
you for 100% that, yeah, our problem's resolved. You know, we need some more hours on
Gotcha.
that machine, because as dirty as that engine is, it's gonna take some flushing to get some of that sludge out.
Back to preventative maintenance.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, some of these filters, when we pulled them out, the outside mesh on the filters was disintegrating. It was
Well,
falling
your
apart.
diesel truck wouldn't run that way.
Exactly.
Your modern diesel truck wouldn't, so.
Well, and that was the point. When I started, some of these engines hadn't ran for 8 to 12 months. That was my very first comment to the guys down there, is would you park your truck for 12 months and go jump in it and try to drive across the country and be upset when the battery's dead? Or when it doesn't run because there's some issue. And we gotta start doing, but step one was getting the guys, I mean, we were a 24/7 facility down there, so you didn't really have there was not a lot of good opportunity for partner working on system. Everything's big, heavy down there.
The two guys typically.
And one of the guys,
One guy overnight.
and that one guy's job was to be in the control room and turning on the water pumps, on, off. I mean, that was his job. So you had one guy really running around the plant that safely can only do so much, you know, and
They were just an operator.
they were an operator, and now that we got 5 guys down there full time, 40 hours a week, start running these engines, start getting the familiarity as a group, start being able to tackle some of these projects we can handle internally. Then of course the plenty of stuff that we're gonna have to contract out.
Can you run like number 7 for testing without having an outage?
Yeah.
You can.
The reason we had to have the outage is because handing over load to these generators is a pretty simple thing to do. That it's just a straight handoff from the grid to the generator. When you go to pick up load from when town's black, you have a massive inrush, massive amount of inrush current. You've got people's freezers, AC units, whatever, and all these big appliances, and it's a big shock to the system. And that was the reason that engine 8 would transfer load without an issue, but as soon as it was seeing an inrush, some of the protection that was set in there was way too tight, and it was making that engine dumb. And so then it would dump, and we try to put it back on and start back up perfectly fine. Then it would dump. Now we could pick up some of these smaller circuits that only had a few hundred kilowatts on them, and it'd pick them up. But you start picking up a circuit with, you know, like some of these industrial guys were seeing, you start getting a meg or 2 meg on that engine, and it would instantly dump it. And we'd have no indication as to why. That's why we had to do this troubleshooting outage. Unfortunately, we shouldn't have lost the engine in the first place when we handed it over. I mean, that should be the question. Why did we lose it in the first place? Well, we lost it because of high exhaust temps on a couple of the heads. You know, so that's one of those things that we got to learn as operators to kind of troubleshoot, which part of that was the programming. Once again, there was 45 seconds from high alarm to dump the engine. We opened up that parameter from 25 degrees to 75 degrees to start getting more warning, you know, because not anyone that's in here can react in 40 seconds to go fix a head issue. That's dial in your natural gas injection in your cylinders, and you can either cool or heat up a head by fine tuning that natural gas injection. On diesel, it's not too big a deal, and heads don't run near as hot, but on diesel, they're a lot hotter, so.
What, as a council, what do we gotta do to get this scheduled, get somebody to come in and give us an estimate, what it's gonna take to do all this, so we can get it done? You know, what do we gotta do, so we can okay that, so we can get this?
Anthony and I need time the conversation's already happening, we just gotta get it
That's
on
something we
paper
probably
and bring
need
it
to
to you
do.
guys.
We need to identify the team that's gonna do it.
Okay,
You know, that's probably step one. Work By Works has an advisory consulting component with Ferris Engineering. Ferris has been first step was doing the one line and doing the arc study down there. That was the first thing that Ferris did, that identified, you know, components. And, the grid resiliency grant that we chased down, Ferris was doing that piece and getting that put in place for us. They're familiar with our system of operations down there. As far as the engineering standpoint, they're doing our SCADA project, how that all ties together. And we'd be pulled together holistically, in the long run. And then the next piece would be, is there enough expertise on their team to deal with the mechanical component of the engines or not? Do we need a Farabee or a team like that to get in? Farabee's hard to get. You know, if you have something you need, they will get a team member here. If you're scheduling for stuff like that, usually their team is somewhere else getting those things done. So we'd have to talk to Chris and see if we can get his group kind of pulled together and find the time and get that all kind of scheduled and what dollars would be associated with that. And what we're gonna get out. Yeah, so we need to kind of develop, I guess, a scope of work and pick that team and see how we can accommodate it in the budget.
And then back to that Wärtsilä, I mean, it has its own demons that need to be ironed out. Like you say, to get someone, they're coming out of Houston or out of Florida. We brought them up a couple weeks ago. They did a couple programming corrections that need to be made after we changed VFD on one of the fuel pumps. It had to be reprogrammed. He happened to be down in Hayes, Kansas. He came up for a couple days, or a day, got it fixed, ran it perfectly fine. We come back in Monday, and we lost the air compressor, which controls the instrument control air for that engine. And you're dead in the water without instrument air. So one of the things we talked about is trying to, we have other air compressors in there. It's only 100 PSI air that system needs to run on. Cross tie this thing so we can, in an emergency, we can bring air over to this, dubbed pretty critical air compressor. All we need to do is get air to that tank, even if it don't run. At least we have instrument air. So trying to think outside the box like that. You have OPPD has recently installed some of these Wärtsiläs up in Omaha, or actively install them. I don't know what the status is exactly, but I've had conversations with OPPD, just kind of off the side here, in passing, that maybe there's perhaps an opportunity that, because they're going to have techs on site that are going to build these Wärtsiläs, that in due time, maybe in a year or two, once they have their stuff ironed out, that we might be able to take advantage of their staff that they have, their knowledge, maybe that we could have an O&M agreement with them to maybe send someone, I don't know, but these are thoughts that are out there, the conversations that we're having, just trying to
Fix the problem.
fix the problem, think of anyone that is the unfortunate thing with that engine is there's not a whole lot of expertise out there, and I think it's by design, to be honest, a little bit. I mean, the OEM made it a way that they want the OEM to be involved with any corrective action. So our biggest thing is getting that water SCADA put in, so the operators are no longer, power plant operators are no longer doing water plant operating, and then getting that 5-man, 40-hour-a-week staff schedule down there, so we can start working on these things and start running. The engines need to be ran. I mean, there's no way around it. We have a frequency of, at least quarterly, all these engines will be run. The Wärtsilä, their OEM rep says it needs to be ran probably at a minimum once a month, at least until we get our kinks worked out weekly, whether it's 30 minutes to an hour. Got to get in the operating temp, though, you're going to be burning some fuel, but that's just kind of part of it.
How long is it gonna be before we get our SCADA system set?
We're really close to having the specifications finished. I'm hoping it's out to bid here in the next
Water skate
month.
is.
Water skate is done.
Water
So
skate's
that's
done,
what
okay.
he was talking about, that's
Yeah,
finished,
that's
so
done,
that
okay.
got done this
I was gonna say, I
last
thought
go
we did.
around.
Do we
An
got a
hour.
generator hooked up? Is that where we need a generator for it, the water tower, for that system?
Well, just for some other controls that are there.
Yeah, okay, then that would be a backup, I think.
Yeah, kind of a little in the weeds, but we have a major water controls system upgrade that already occurred. There's equipment at the water tower, in the base of the water tower, that needs power. With this gas project that's going on, we're gonna add a backup generator. There's antennas and stuff up there on top of the water tower, plus some of our equipment that needs just some 120 power.
Districts.
We're gonna put a small, just a small, like 10 kW generator up there. And then there's another controls project that's in the works right now that Ferris Engineering is contracted to put the specifications for and to manage, do project management, to replace all the electromagnetic GE relays. It's all the protective equipment that's in place for the generators and for our circuit breakers, and put all new Schweitzer Engineering relays in. And that's just gonna add to the safety and the reliability of, not necessarily the reliability, how the reliability is reflected is from the troubleshooting. As issues persist, like we had one here last July where we kept having South Industrial trip. We had no idea. We hung some fault indicators on it, tried to narrow it down. We couldn't, it just wouldn't show its face, but you start getting some of this technology in place that'll help you narrow down where your search needs to be focused.
I think Andy's got a.
Yeah, so, I obviously don't know all the details at the power plant. I'm gonna back you up on what you said. This new generation of technology is designed that you or anybody can't fix it. It's highly computerized. So with that said, what about the older generators? Like, I guess I'm not following.
The older generators are beasts, I mean, they run.
That's my point. That's what I wanted to relay
The,
across.
the problem is the old generators they're not Rice-NESHAP compliant, so they don't have catalysts on them, so we're limited to 50 hours of emergency runtime and 50 hours of maintenance. Our engines 7, 8, and 9 are Rice-NESHAP compliant, they have catalysts in them, they have to be our workhorses. You have them other engines back there that are there for emergency backup, but that's really it, and they need to be just as reliable, and they are, honestly.
So it's an EPA issue.
That's what
Yeah.
I talked about.
It's an air quality
Yes.
issue.
Yes, and just reiterate, I'm backing you on this. I work in aviation. I know the modern stuff is designed that nobody in here can work on it.
Yeah, I think it's by,
Unfortunately, and
by
that's
default that
where
way.
the money comes in.
and so there's an opportunity that's sitting there for us that we've had numerous conversations with the board and Anthony and I. We can make those older engines. We have about 6 megawatts of capacity in them old diesel engine, well, they're dual fuel, but them older engines, where we can put catalysts on them and make them net Rice-NESHAP compliant.
Could you explain everything, the catalyst part, just so we all understand?
It's basically the DPF on your diesel
Just
pickup.
explain it really quick.
Go ahead, you were finishing. I mean, what would an upgrade to install catalyst on those outdated engines?
So
Is that possible?
absolutely, it's $75 per kW. I mean, you're talking for a megawatt unit, $75,000. We got 3 units. That's what, $225,000 somewhere in there. $250,000 ish. I mean, mind you, we're just throwing numbers around here, but somewhere $250,000. We can have 6 megawatts, 6 megawatts of Rice-NESHAP compliant, which is basically fancy language from the state that says, yeah, this thing is past air quality emissions. You reduce the NOx, and now they're available just like our engine 7, 8, and 9. Well, capacity has a massive value right now. When I first started, the capacity, try to keep this short, but capacity has a big value. It used to only be $1, $2 a kilowatt month. Now we just contracted 10 megawatts of load worth at $4 to $4.50 a kilowatt month, which basically equates to $500,000 a year in revenue that we were just sitting on. That's the market for, they call it spinning reserve. So those engines have the ability to make megawatts. We don't need it. It's extra capacity. All these great big entities like Evergy, OPPD, NPPD, they need that capacity, because if your generation, or if your load is 100 megawatts, you got to have what's called resource adequacy. So if you have 100 megawatts and you're a summer peak, your resource adequacy is 16% of your load. So that means you have to have 16 megawatts. Even though you only sell 100 megawatts, you have to have 16 extra megawatts on the books. Well, the cost of generation is astronomical, and plus all the process to even get it built. You have facilities like Falls Cities that are sitting there. We don't need it. We need so many megawatts to cover our load, but we have extra. So places like, which we contracted with Evergy, was a $2.5 million agreement over 5 years just to have the capability to produce in a what-if situation. And there's
So maybe
1,000
installing
wells.
the catalyst on the syringes would be more than worth it then.
So now the capacity is worth double what we sold it a year ago. So basically, if we sold 5 more megawatts at $9 a kilowatt per month, you'd make another $2.5 million bucks.
But I'm just trying to say that you're having $225,000 to get these catalysts, and I think it's
So
just
the
a
catch
no-brainer
is,
right now is.
it's not just.
Plus, that gives us a little bit more reliability on our end for outages, and if number 9 is gonna continue to be fickle.
Yeah,
As
and
long
the,
as you get 8 and 7.
catch is,
they got backups,
this
especially-
money isn't just gravy, you have to be reliable, these things, when they're called on,
That
they
seems
have to
like
be
a
able to
pretty
fire.
good call though. Go ahead and get the catalyst. I mean, it's another move forward, right?
That's one of our, that's another
Good.
thing that we've identified that we wanna get in the budget and make happen, even if we just put it in, sit on it, and had to decommission them in 5 years, you know?
It'll get your
Is that a short term, so
Get
given
your
the
ROI.
situation now, with everything that we've had going on, if 9 is still a problem child, then is this a solution in the short term? Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money, but what's the hesitation there? Like,
So that
outside of the
you,
financial
if you put the money in for the catalyst to make them Rice NESAP compliant, and we sold that capacity, we technically don't have that capacity to rely on, because we sold it. There's a little bit of balancing we'd have to do with our wheeling agent to make sure we don't overextend ourselves on how much we sell. But in theory, you have a 9 megawatt Cadillac sitting there, but we just gotta work out the kinks, you know, we gotta.
Getting back to that, Trevor, you're, saying, or selling back, you know, to make maybe $2.5 million. To me, I think what Joe's trying to say, and everybody's saying, the citizens here, we want reliable electricity, so the whole thing is if we can fix them generators up, so they're working to produce electricity,
They
so
already-
we're not having the outages.
With the catalytic converter.
Yeah, with it, I mean, would that help produce,
We already utilize them in that, I mean, if our gen's down and town's black, we kinda dub it as an emergency situation, we run them anyways.
If we're without transmission power, that deems an emergency,
Right.
that's not an SPP.
And you got what, the 50
Disaster
hours you can run?
emergency.
50 hours of maintenance, it's 100 hours total a year, 50 hours of maintenance, 50.
You can always fudge something under maintenance too, if you need it, right?
So those are enough for maybe, one circuit, some of those are 1.5 meg,
Because they don't have a lot of load.
1.3.
Every little bit will help, right?
So I guess that's
One's
something,
1940. right?
that's something for everyone to understand, is we have 7 different operational generators. One of them can run most of town, and then our smallest one might be able to carry one of the circuits. They're different horsepower ratings, they're different kilowatt capabilities. So that's depending on what the load is, and that's what the important part of an operator is understanding what is the load doing, is it going up, is it going down? Which engines do I need to have running, which engines do I need to be prepared to kill, which engines do I need to be prepared to be bringing on? Because you're chasing load, and then you're also looking at what time of day, what time of month, what time of year. Are the factories open? Are they closed? Are schools, what businesses? Is our water tower filled up with water? Is my number one priority. If the water tower is close to empty, I hate to say it, but our priority is getting circuit 1 back on. Now, that shouldn't be the case. We need to fix that problem also, that one of our main feeders provides the water to town. So there's no backup generation, and that's one of the focuses with this $800,000 grid resiliency grant that I just got word back that she hasn't told me congratulations, but she said we'll know by early next week. And she's already kind of beat around the bush that we got that, but that's gonna be one of those grants to address that exact problem. So our priority can be South Industrial Circuit, so it can be our commercial districts. There's just a lot of irons in the fire right now, and we're trying to work through them.
If we fix this plan up, it's worth the money to get the catalyst on
Absolutely.
it. It's like a gold mine, it's gonna pay for itself.
That thing's worth,
It's a gold mine for a little bit of time. I mean,
Yeah.
that capacity
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
probably not
Right.
have value at some point in
Yeah,
time.
but
But
right now it covers
that's where the
cost
market
and-
is.
If all the old engines were compliant, they could potentially supply the load in an emergency to the city of Fall City and also be contracted out to supply.
we have enough, with our engine 7, 8, and 9, we had 10 extra megawatts of capacity, so we have.
So those aren't the old ones, all right?
No, these are the newest.
But
ones.
if the old ones were upgraded,
There'd
we
be
could-
extra capacity
they'd
that we
be
could
extra
sell.
capacity that we could sell and support
We'd
our
still
our
be able
city.
to support,
Okay.
yeah.
It's how you set up the contracts, they have to be RICE compliant or QSHAP compliant, so we reference 7, 8, and 9 in our current capacity. So we need if it were to get called upon in a disaster component of energy system, I need that 10 megawatts now, we get paid to produce that, but we would have to pick 7, 8, or 9, or a multitude of those to create that megawatts, and they might say they only need 2. In this case, what you're selling is with more paper capacity. It's just really putting it from our resource book to their resource book to show there's that margin above. Because a lot of these entities just went from, a 16% margin, the SPP changed their summer margin to 33. So these entities, that's why entities like Evergy and these bigger players are looking at municipalities and little entities. Everybody's got 14,000 megawatts in their portfolio. Do you think they need our 10? They're trying to get a bunch of different little small ones now to help build their resources up in their workbooks, because there's such a gap.
So, could we really come up with a plan to get that on the agenda, to get it approved, to get the money to upgrade those? I guess that's the main
We need
goal.
to solicit an RFP, develop that scope of work, and say, here's what it is, here's what we wanna get out of it.
I think that's the main thing, let's figure out what's gonna cost, then let's do it.
That's what I was trying to say, let's just figure out how we do that and get it done.
Yeah.
As long as this
council
money well
wants to
spent.
Yeah.
We don't wanna throw money at something if
No.
it's not gonna produce, so we gotta be smart.
Figure out what it's gonna cost.
So just to make this clear, throwing money at them older engines and getting catalyst on them and getting them air quality compliant isn't gonna resolve any issues. It's gonna open up a revenue source that you can put that revenue towards these other issues that we've talked about. Getting these engines reliable, working on stuff in the electric distribution system. At some point, I call it my 5-year plan, is getting a black start engine down there. So when the operators show up, the light's already on at the power plant, God forbid the power's off, and town's water pumps have power, which would not require someone to have to come there and turn it on. It just would see that there's no power and the generator kick on. So that's one of the things that, that's one of them 5-year goals. Right now, we're working on demoing 2 of the oldest engines that have been out of commission for over 20 years. They're probably about 75% removed. That's kind of step 1 into making space for a future black start engine. So it's just, you can only throw so much money at a problem. Some of it's just being able to physically manage it. Identify the issues, troubleshoot the issues, and follow up with the issues. It's more of a time issue than a dollar issue. There's ways to navigate the dollars. We're trying to navigate the time. You can't buy time, so we're trying to. That was part of the restructuring of the power plant people down there, so they can be focused on during the day. What do we need to spending our focus on? Is it on water as a power plant operator, or is it on these engines that haven't had preventative maintenance in 20 years? We're starting to identify these issues now, so.
Historically, you had maintenance budgets and fuel budgets that were in the tens of thousands. It's not gonna function moving forward, just keep that in the tens of thousands.
No, but from a council standpoint, we can't buy you more time, but if we can help you find supplemental revenue to assist with some of these upgrades, and we don't have to necessarily cut another department short, that's kind of our, job is to help you. So when we're asking on Kenny's like, what can we do to help you? This is a perfect example of something that we can try to help out to bring in some more of that, to help us with these upgrades. So that's just, we need to know about it though, so thank you for bringing this up.
Thanks you for the clarification too, but now it's understandable.
Maybe you have something like that?
Yeah, so, the incompliant engines that you referred to as the tanks, the old reliables, how is not upgrading them to meet the OSHA standards not help our issue of generation in the city? You said it's not gonna solve our issue,
Because
but couldn't it help?
what I mean by that is we're already using them.
Okay,
But
but
in
if
an
they were
emergency
compliant,
situation,
we could use them more.
yeah, already we can use them more, but we already have 30 megawatts of RICE NESHAP compliant air quality approved engines. We only run on, right now we're 6.2 megawatts.
But it's
of rate.
unreliable. That suggests I'm getting it.
Engines 7 and 8 are.
Okay.
pretty, you know, there's some of that older technology.
Okay,
Engine
They're
9 is the new one.
okay, gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Engine 8 is an older 1982
There's too
Cooper.
many damn engines for me to remember, I apologize.
There is. You got a Wurzel, you got Cooper, Enterprise, a bunch of Fairbanks
I
Moores.
get it.
But
Our older ones are from the thirties through the eighties.
Right.
That's 3 through
8.
7, or 3 through 8, and then 9's
But
that new.
back to the point is, if they were compliant, you could contract
There's-
energy out
yeah,
and make money
You
and
can
help
contract
upgrade
that out,
the rest
whether
of the
that's through
system.
them or through one of the other engines.
Mhm.
In terms of we use them constantly, because if we just need to shed 1 or 2 meg, we don't fire up 7 or 8, they're too large. They want 2, 3, 4 meg to be running on them to run efficient. So we are firing up those.
Gotcha.
Because they're smaller and try to navigate that rolling, hours, that how many you can have. But it adds it up, but it is only 5 to 6 megs, which majority of town runs from 3 megs spending the time to 15 megs at our peak. So there's a gap there that you still need the reliability of those.
But there's a
others.
resource that could be making money, correct?
There is now.
Okay, keep us posted.
Yep.
Next item.
Right.
Thank you.
Pat?
Thank you.
I just wanna point one thing out that you might have missed in what Trevor said. MPPD is in Southwest Power Pool also, OPPD, all the big utilities. If you contract out, you need to remember, you contract what you know you can give up. Because when Texas had the big ice freeze, a couple years ago, MPPD and OPPD had to shed power to provide what they committed to, which meant some rolling brownouts and blackouts in Nebraska when that happened, because you commit that amount. So compliant is good, you give us some extra money, you just have to remember when you set that agreement up, you don't shed a promise more than you can provide for the city and what you're giving to that other entity.
We got browned out there in the whole thing ourselves when
Yep.
that happened. We got browned out here because OPPD
Correct.
couldn't get us power, which we had to generate our own. And you're right, if you got some curtailed for something else, then you can't use that same power. It's already
So-
probably sorted out, that's the
So
contract.
when you get to the point of setting up those agreements, like MPPD does, and I know PPD does the same, your big power draws, they got agreements with them. If we get in this situation, we're gonna give you notice for like somebody like the Dusty's food place, or where they're making the aircraft parts, whatever it may be, we're giving you notice you're gonna have to shut down or shut some of your stuff down or shut down completely for a period of time so we can meet this agreement and not lose everything in town too.
Thank you.
and
We did that same scenario with when we sold that 10. We still have around 1.7 meg that's of our portfolio that's allowed for our growth that we didn't sell. But we do have to forecast. I mean, you gotta do that load forecast. We gotta think about the next year. If you contract that for 5, what happens in 3? Or do you need to contract that on the short term? There's a bunch of different scenarios to look at, what you need to do and how you need to continue to bring that into your portfolio.
I just want to end this, I guess, by saying, Anthony and I discussed whether or not we should have let the public know last Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that there was gonna be a disconnect from the transmission service, not necessarily an outage, but a disconnect from the transmission service. And we went back and forth and decided that, no, everything should go off without a hitch, we should be able to do our part, we should be able to generate, and nobody know the difference. And after about a day and a half in, we were successful in doing that, and going forward, we've discussed, at least until we are getting ourselves to what he's referring to as 5.9 compliant or reliable, we're just gonna let everyone know when there's anything happening.
That's a very
You know,
good
The
idea.
more info out there, the better.
Yes, yes.
We should have been able to do our part, and we wanted to do our part, we were confident in being able to do our part, we were gonna, throw a little clout our guys' way Friday, and no fault of their own, the engines,
I'd say
did
anytime
do
you
their
work on,
part, but,
anytime you
live
work
and
on,
learn. I wish we would've told everyone, especially some of these factories that had some hiccups because of the lack of power, we had a
We're
crystal
gaining
ball.
from 2 years ago down there when you started, so.
Yeah.
Get
I'd say
back.
anything you do, Trevor, you think you're gonna lose power, I'd put a notice out just to let everybody know. I mean,
Thank you.
Move on to number 9, discussion and action. Utilization of electrical distribution support service agreements for a full-time basis. Councilman Lady.
So I prepared a letter and the council's got it and it's in the packets, for people to read, and there's also a letter from Fall City Foods. You know, I don't like to have to spend the extra money, to have RS here full-time, but, you know, I think we have to, and that's just for, not just for the industries down south, but for all businesses and people in general, we need to be proactive. You know, and by them being here, and able to do some of those little projects here and there to create us a more sustainable or efficient grid that we have, I think it's important because, you know, if there's something that they can do during the week and we can prevent outages throughout the night or on the weekends and having to call them up because, you know, they're down in St. Joe and, you know, if it's a Saturday, you know, the guys on call for us might be out doing something and have to get home, get dressed, get to the RS, grab their truck, come up here. Could be 2 to 3 hours before they can get stuff going. So I really think that we need to just, you know, and you can decide how you want, but I think we need to be proactive on this. You know, I think we've all heard, and you know, and I'm probably just as guilty beating up on previous Board of Public Works and councils because they weren't proactive enough. And the more I thought about that, it's kind of unfair because who would have thought 30 years ago everybody would have, you know, had 5 TVs, 7, you know, personal electronics charging, you know, even some car chargers here and there. I mean, nobody would have planned that. I mean, in 30 years from now, people will be cussing us because we weren't proactive enough because we didn't see the future coming. But what we got to say is we got to learn from our past and not make the same mistakes that previous boards and councils have made by not being proactive. Have RS Electric here for the short time. You know, because Anthony mentioned that, you know, he's got some interviews done, had some quality people, but we're lacking a journeyman, you know, so if we had RS Electric here full-time for 2 months as a stopgap until we get these people on board, because even if we sent the offers out to 6 guys today, you know, they're gonna need to give 2 weeks or more to wherever they're working for. And then, you know, they're gonna be a couple weeks onboarding, so you're looking at least a month before they're going, and then we have the whole fact we don't have a journeyman. And I'm not an expert on what a journeyman's needed for, if there's jobs that they can do without a journeyman present, but even in that case, we're gonna have to look to have an RS probably journeyman here until we can locate a journeyman, and then, you know, I think it's something for a future meeting, we gotta talk about steps we have to do in order to attract a qualified journeyman to the city. But I just asked the council just to, you know, think about it, because I think if we can get some minor things fixed that need attention throughout the week, hopefully we can stop or minimize the amount of outages we have at nights or weekends. So I guess I'll yield to the floor, and if anybody else has any ideas, and then I do know we have some people from some industries here. We have Board of Public Works here, if they would like to address it, because, you know, as the Fall City Foods letter says, and I've indicated, I mean, we have people down. I mean, I know when we lost those generators, I closed a loan via flashlight, and we were, you know, I had all my staff sitting around, you know, unable to do something because we're completely computer based. You know, you can't bank without a computer and electricity, and so I mean, you know, I saw some lost productivity in there, and you know, it cost the bank money, but it costs everybody money, and it's just an inconvenience. So I'll let.
Could we put like a time limit? Say if we haven't got anybody in a month, you know, give this for a month, and if it doesn't happen, you know, because it could be 8 months. That'd be a lot of money every week if we just set a limit on how long they're going to be, and they're going to reevaluate it and say, ain't got nobody yet. Let's give them another month instead of just saying unlimited. You're here till we find somebody.
Well, I mean, I think if we're interviewing, I mean, I guess we can.
But we don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, but there again, we go back to.
Anthony, I have a question for you. I know when we originally discussed this, you said it would cause a shortfall in the budget on the electrical side if we worked in the 40 hours a week up to hell. Since we kind of work on part-time, have you taken another look at that number to see if we put them on the 40 hours, are we still gonna shortfall the budget somewhere, or do we have the dollars in the budget
we're definitely gonna, exceed our original labor line is around 600 grand for our electric distribution team. So if we use, whether that's, like our NPPD rates are, we have that support service agreement, they're around a little over $490 an hour for their crew. And there is a 2-man crew, with a third if you need it. RS Autos here, and got us a little more data, kind of put through, they have a 40-hour schedule, so they work typically Monday through Thursday, or you can do an extended Monday through Friday. They're about $460 an hour overall for a 40-hour week. So a little over 18,000 a week. It's about $350K through the remainder of this year. There's 19 weeks left to get us through into fiscal. 19 weeks and 2 days, not counting this current week. You have 148K remaining in pretty much the existing line crew budget for their labor and all the vacation stuff we paid out and everything else that was pushed through, and all the extra storm work. We had to pay OPPD, or not OPPD, excuse me, Auburn and NPPD. Eventually we'll recover that, hopefully through the disaster, but that got brought into this year, those extra dollars. So we're ahead of that. If you use those and do like a Monday through Thursday, you're still gonna have potentially some Fridays, some weekends that come up that are gonna have extra dollars beyond that 40-hour week. I got estimated it to be around $375,000 to get us through the end of the year if we did it all the way through. That'd leave you, you have about $225,000. So, 375 minus 150 would be the extra that's in there. That would need to be absorbed into that budget. Now, it is budgeted for we have capital improvement dollars that are pushed in there for improvements. The grid resiliency grant, the Watts, those schedules, we were budgeted those to be expended out this fiscal year. They're gonna extend beyond, they're gonna be looking going into next fiscal. So there are dollars there, in the current budget that can accommodate that 225 fairly easy, but it is capital dollars that would then need to move to a labor component.
I think even though we've, the numbers we can make work, I'd almost echo what, Derek said about just the proactiveness, cause when we first decided this, and I'll eat my words, it was emergency only. Let's get RS in, but it's emergency only. At this point, we're a month, 6-7 weeks in, we still don't have staff. Normally, it's always, let's work on this with Fall City employees, keep it local. I just don't think that's possible now. I'm kind of with you that if we sit back and we don't do anything, then what's gonna happen? I mean, because we've got employees that, could probably handle it, we've got applicants, but.
We've spent almost 12,000 in 2 weeks coming up, moving them out of long distances and paying windshield time.
If we sit back and we do nothing,
About 12,000.
then what's gonna happen? And it's gonna fall back on us because we turn a blind eye to an issue that we know about, but, I think something needs to be done.
For 40 hours a week, if they can find and fix stuff so that it doesn't break, we don't have outages, we don't have the phone calls.
And say we hire 4 people, we don't have a journeyman, could we hire a journeyman from them to fill in if we had a journeyman, so we wouldn't have to have them all, that whole time?
There could be discussions for it. I don't know how,
You know,
we're talking about an operational plan of another
Well, I know,
entity.
I'm just trying to throw that out there to.
I don't know.
And I don't want to put Otto on the spot, because that is,
Right, I
that's
know
something,
that, I understand.
that's something we have talked with NPPD, offered a similar component where that could be done, but that's a whole nother
Right.
agreement and operation piece that they're still gonna be shooting over to us to take a look at.
I think we're in a position where we have to minimize, our risk. I mean, it comes down to risk management, and if we don't do anything, then we're negligent. We've gotta do something, so.
Trevor, you got enough land where you could have enough for them? I mean, I'm sure there is. Well, I mean, with our infrastructure, there is, I guarantee it.
I can keep
But-
them busy for 100 hours a week if we want.
Yeah, I know, I think that's our, but what I'm saying is 5 days a week, you could do line.
Yeah, I mean,
So originally when this kinda came out, you showed me some service work that needed done for customers, like, hey, this guy wants underground service, or whatever it was, that, that's billable back.
So driving through I drove around here for about an hour before the meeting, and I think we call it hardening, system hardening. You start with your three-phase lines, your three-phase circuits, you harden them, whether it's replacing insulators, either cross arms that are bad, poles. And I think that's where you start, and that'll definitely harden your system so that when the wind blows, you don't have an outage. Also comes with tree trimming that that has to be done. But it's not just our guys sitting up here for 40 hours not doing anything. The plan that I've seen is customer driven stuff like, hey, the new business needs a service, like, hey, that's priority, that's billable back, you go do that, that's a different invoice that we invoice back. And then when there isn't that kind of customer driven work, it's hardening, it's going through and making the system more reliant and not just, some people think, oh, a dock crew, they're just sitting there waiting for an outage. That's not what it is. They'll be working full time. And then going back to what the cost has been so far, those are considered emergency call outs, so that's why it's such a high rate. You call somebody in on Saturday, it's time and a half. That's just the nature of the beast.
This last week, I know you guys said emergency work, but to me, some of the service work is emergency work. One of our customers sent us a $20,000 check for a new cell phone tower south of town. It needed to be hooked up. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Knocked that project out in less than a day and a half. They cut us a check for $20,000. Majority of their labor, of course, their labor costs more than ours, but a lot of that's on that commercial customer. I mean, some of these other ones also that they did last week. The biggest thing is trying to line up work so they can be productive and efficient. Coming up and switching out a blown fuse, you have 4 times as much windshield time than you do in the actual effort to replace the fuse. And I don't know, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on 40 hours a week if your guys would be staying here in town in a camper, or if they'd be going
most of the time you'll get 1 or 2 that stays. Typically, like I live in Cameron, Missouri, which is an hour and a half from here. If we pull foreman from there, they'll probably drive back and forth just to see their family. But typically you'll get 1 or 2 that'll stay here. If it's something simple, they'll run out and take a look at least know what you have. We do the similar thing like this for other municipalities, Trenton, Missouri, Cameron, Bethany, Lamar. And what I can say is their reliability is definitely a lot higher because every year they dedicate so much to hardening their system. I mean, we've been in Bethany, Missouri for the last 6 weeks, and they pick a circuit and they just say, hey, here's the game plan. We want you to go rebuild the circuit. And it's not poles and everything. It could be, hey, just go up, look at what needs replaced, fix it. And it just makes it, when I first started Bethany 6 years ago, every time it stormed, I'd text them, are you good? Now anymore, I don't even text them because I know it's good.
I think some of this information helps though too, because it's kind of back to the generator. The general public doesn't understand what's going on. I mean, the city council, let alone, probably knows just the tip of the iceberg. So, as a citizen, you see RS come in, and basically the back history is we had a bunch of employees leave, and now this is our backup plan. So I think a lot of people just think that, yeah, you're gonna come up, you're gonna sit, and you're just gonna wait for the phone to ring, and then you're gonna go fix something. But if you're hardening and you explain that, and we can relay that information, I think that's where you start getting a little bit of support from the community, because we still have staffing issues, obviously, but we need to ensure that the city understands, just like we discussed with the generators, that if you guys are in town, you're not just sitting there waiting. It's something that's gonna, help the community. So as much of that information that you can relay, whether it's through us or the media, I think you need to be transparent and open with your communication so everybody understands why you're here and what you're doing. And I think that will help overall.
I'll say the original, when this kind of all came about and I got a phone call to be brought in, I had a whole page of customer service driven work, meaning like, hey, service upgrade, whatever, that was already planned. I was telling Trevor, like, while they get started on that, pick a circuit and I'll go through, drive it out, red tag what needs repaired, come up with a list. And then that could just be when they're not on customer driven work, that's what they fall back on is hardening or cross arm replacements or, going back to poly versus the glass. That's what I see a lot of people do is getting rid of the porcelain because there's cracks in it, you don't see till it rains, tracks, blows up, now it's a big problem.
Reliability.
It's identifying, it's the exact same work we would have been doing with our crew. We just need to line up the work and get it done. That's what we were asking our crew to get done. Let's go through, like, where do we spend the dollars, where do we do these things? That's neither here nor there, that's the issues that were there. Now we can utilize RS, we can still do those same components to get what we need done at this point in time.
And to take it a step further too, we've had communication with, they're called Osmos. They do pole inspections, NPPD uses them, OPPD uses them, a lot of the REAs around here use them. They're one of the best in the pole inspection industry for their money, and waiting to get a proposal back from them. They have 3 different kind of pole inspection,
Inspection
levels, you know, low, cheap, medium, and expensive. You know, we're looking at, we have over 3,512 poles, based off of some of our other stuff that we've done that.
None have been ever inspected besides our crew hitting it with a hammer or popping it with a screwdriver, you know, it's never went through a full depth inspection.
They'll do a full town inspection, kind of rough estimate, you know, probably gonna be around $100,000. Get every pole inspected, they'll rank it, the criticality of each pole, and then that also, you know, if RS is still here or whoever is here, or you know, even in the future with planned and budgeted projects, we'll take that data and say, hey, we need to, just kind of like they did with Bethany, some of these other towns you rattle off, is, you know, we need to replace 100 poles. Well, which 100 poles that need, we can go replace 100 poles, but which ones are gonna make the biggest impact to reliability of our system for the dollar? That's what we have to understand, and we have zero data. We gotta have data so you guys, we can make educated decisions on where the best dollar spent for our customers to gain that reliability of our system. I mean, it's about that cut and dry, really. I mean, we just gotta have data to be able to strategize, plan, prioritize, budget, and execute. I mean, it's what we gotta do. And it's all in the works.
Can we do a month-to-month deal, or how?
I mean, the contract we have with them is just how we set them up to do it. So essentially, we can line them up with weeks worth of work, and next week say we're not there. I mean, we don't necessarily want to do that because we need them here for that system. I think we could associate dollars and give, you know, Trevor the authority to go, okay, let's utilize RS on a whatever basis up to certain threshold. You know, deal with those projects. If it's over a certain amount, it needs to come here anyways. So, you know, if it's over $20,000 worth of hardening work, we're gonna need to look at that and still go through the normal procurement that we would need to go through. But initially, you'd be looking at least that labor piece tied in with that, with that basic component, which is, if you have it there, it's 19 weeks, like I said, 19 weeks to the end of fiscal, so.
Well, something to think about too, to catch us up there quick, is these guys are here for us to support us in, you know, in this unfortunate time, and their planning is very difficult, especially when we can't tell them, hey, we need 40 hours this week, this month, you know, or 5 hours a day for this emergency, you know. They have crews running around. They're not sitting there at home waiting for us to call them. They got a whole region to cover. So the more straightforward with them we can be, the easier Otto and I can work together. And he's not going to tell me to go fly a kite when we're in a situation and he's trying to pick between us and the next guy.
And I'm not asking for a 6-month commitment.
No, it's week by week.
Yeah, a couple weeks heads up would be great. You know, I get.
Well, isn't it sort of like based on our ability to fill our own staff? I mean, I don't think we really put a dollar amount to it, even though we have parameters and everything, but I think the whole community would be a lot more comfortable having somebody on staff available 24/7, at least during the week. And I understand these guys are away from home, they come up here, the last thing they want to do is sit around somewhere waiting for something to do, so as long as you're planning, I think as long as RS is willing and we have a working agreement, you can put out an agenda for them so they can, when they're not doing customer-based stuff, and do the hardening the maintenance and putting out a few things and looking at the cross arms and the lag bolts that are missing and the insulators that are bad, I think it's worth it to us because that's part of our upgrade anyway, until we can hire our own staff. That's what we gotta do.
So in our contract, we could give you a 2-week notice that we won't need your services, or,
We've already signed the
I'll
contract.
say,
but the full-time contract.
it's all, it's no services.
We'll just
How
agree.
long?
Yeah.
Let them work.
So the same contract, we don't need to redo the contract.
Just the terms and, or,
Time and equipment, or labor and equipment.
labor
So
and equipment,
Okay.
T&E.
it's just agreed upon rates that when we're here, this is what we're charging you, and when you're done,
We're gonna agree on just, we work 4 days a week, 5 days a week.
Emergency or
Anthony,
make
did you have a price, 4 days and 5 days a week? You said something about 4 days? 5 days on what?
Yeah, so their 4-day price, that would include per diems and fuel and equipment and everything, is 4 10-hour days, is about $460 an hour. Monday through Friday, was that an 8-hour day, Otto, or
5/10s.
5/10s? Okay, that's what I assumed. So a 5/10, they'd be a little over $600 an hour, so 24,000 a week versus a little over 18,000 a week.
And the reason I kinda did that is like if something happens on Friday and you call anyways, it's already overtime. So really, you're best stay at the 4/10s. If something comes up, you're already paying the overtime on Fridays anyways.
Alright.
What action do we need to take though?
Well, I
We've
think
already got-
right now, we have an action to say use them on a pretty much an on-call
I
basis.
mean, like, our employees, 20,400 a week. How many employees would that have paid for that we would have had with the city?
So our hourly rate, which doesn't include equipment, is about $288 an hour for our crew.
So basically, you're doubling that.
288 to 460.
510? 510 is what you said? 510,
450.
cause that included,
460 minus 288. So that's
$172.
$172.
okay, what was the $510?
No, but he was saying 5/10s is in
5 10-hour days.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha,
Yeah, okay, sorry, I was lost there for a second.
gotcha.
$178 more an hour.
An hour.
Yes, to do 5 10-hour days,
178, right?
which is.
So we talk about being proactive and the reliability of the utility service to Fall City, and rebuilding our own crew, as I understand it. Have we been proactive in identifying the root cause for the resignation of 6 local talents? Because we can rebuild, and that might be great, or it might fail and then we're back here again.
Like it was discussed in closed session with this council and the employees, and it stays in closed session with those discussions.
So we may still have an issue then, basically, is what you're saying.
No.
I was never let it go.
No.
So
Just
we're gonna say-
Not at all?
I don't see why you would have an issue. They all resigned or walked away from their jobs. They did not go, and I may be, just what I know. They had a union agreement. They could have followed that process. The city has a process for filing complaints through their HR process. Don't sound like all of that was done. I hate it too that they're all gone. I know several of them, get along fine with them. They always did good work when I had an outage. But fact is fact, they chose to walk away.
So
without
shouldn't that
going
be
through
the
the
most
process.
concerning point, is they said, F it, we're out?
It is what it is. I mean,
What do you want from this?
Yeah.
Do we have a
Andy, everybody, from the discussions, everybody on the council has a lot better understanding of the whole situation. If that helps answer your question. We have a way better understanding of where we did prior to the police.
That's not
We
part
need
of
to
it.
see if Dusty has anything.
Dusty, did
Just
you
trying
have?
to help you. Dusty
I just
has-
say, as a business, trying to run a business in town is, it's all about weighing the risk. I think bringing RS in for maintenance and preventative maintenance, I get that it's gonna cost the city more money, but with us businesses, my business especially, we have to have reliable power. we have to have the hardened the lines, we have to have things that when we come in and we start processing product, what we do at our facilities and all the other industrial facilities down there, for that 8, 10, 12-hour day, we have to have that power. So granted, it costs more money, we can all talk about what happened, this is where we are now, is we have to figure out the solution, we have to minimize the risk for us to keep power for the city. You know, industries aren't gonna come to our city, if we don't have power and it's not reliable. So we're in a situation now to where everybody knows we have power issues, we have power outages. We've had storms. Storms are a little easier to deal with than just random power outages. I do appreciate Trevor saying that they're gonna be a lot more transparent and letting us know what's gonna go on. Because running our facility, when our facility goes black and we're in the middle of processing, we've got a lot of stuff going on, we've got a lot of motors running, we have a lot of equipment that is automated that we can lose electronical functions to. If we have a heads up, we can plan our day, hey, maybe we're not gonna run as much product, maybe we're not gonna run as hard, knowing that we're not on transmission power, we're not on 100% reliable power. I feel like we need the preventative maintenance in town to help. We all know it's an old infrastructure, we know there's stuff that needs to be done. I think RS can come in and it would at least make me feel better about the reliability side of it. Just to say that, hey, you know, they're trying to get things done, they're trying to fix any potential issues of the wind blowing or, you know, strong winds or anything like that, and we have a glitch in power. So I'm coming here asking the council to look at a potential approval of having RS up here for, if it's 40 hours a week or 50 hours, whatever it is, have those guys up here, have them working on the stuff that our city guys aren't working on because we don't have a crew for them. If it takes, everybody knows hiring people in Fall City is hard enough the way it is. You're always gonna have labor issues, but we need to have a plan in place that minimizes the risk of us losing power. Granted, RS is gonna cost us some more money, but over the long term, if it makes our infrastructure better, you know, maybe those guys are gonna come in and see things that maybe necessarily our guys are missing or whatever because they're not highly as trained, they're new guys, they don't understand our system, you don't have any journeymen, so if you don't have journeymen, you just have average employees that don't understand electrical. RS Electric's gonna have guys that are gonna have years of experience, they're gonna know what faulty poles look like, faulty cross arms look like. They're gonna be able to see those issues a lot faster and hopefully resolve them faster and harden up our lines. So, I mean, I think it would be something good for the city. Granted, it's more money, I get that side of it, but we gotta have power. I mean, we have to have reliable power. You know, we can't jump back and forth with $1 here or $1 there when, you know, businesses are losing thousands of dollars for an outage that lasts 4 to 6 hours right in the middle of a day. You know, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 1:30, we're running as hard as we can and we have equipment that goes down. We mitigate that, we come back in the morning, we go to run again, equipment goes back down for an hour and a half. You know, those are things that mess up our production. It changes how we have to process our product. You know, I have to move stuff around, I have to push loads away because we are on a tight schedule of the product that we run has to be processed in a timely manner. So if we have a heads up and knowing if we're not on transmission line, we're trying to generate ourselves, then we can kind of plan accordingly. But, I mean, I think that we need to, like I said, do something to help our infrastructure to keep businesses power and get us, at least make us feel better about, hey, we're seeing guys out working on stuff and fixing insulators or power line, whatever it is, you know, other than, you know, it's been a couple, 2-3 weeks, however long it's been since those guys have left. You know, I'm sure there's not a whole lot of the hardening stuff, the preventative maintenance on our utility lines that's being done. So we need to get back to that, and bite the bullet, I guess, and pay the extra money to where that we're not going backwards, and then 3 months from now, when we get guys that come in, even if you hire guys in a month, it's gonna take them years to understand our grid system, to understand how everything works in this. You know, the power plant has all their issues, everybody knows our town infrastructure has issues too, that it takes experience to learn those things. So I think I'm just, would like the council to consider having a preventative maintenance problem, or preventative maintenance plan with RS to keep us going forward and not taking as much risk of just nothing happening and sitting back and hoping that, you know, we don't have a storm. We're in the peak of storm season now. I mean, we're in the springtime when we have thunderstorms and wind and all this stuff, you know, and if our system is weak, you know, having RS Electric, yeah, you're talking a couple, 2 or 3 hours for them to get up here, and, you know, then they gotta figure out what's wrong, where to diagnose it, all that stuff. So I think having those guys on hand, then those guys get familiar with our layout, get familiar with our lines, and in the event of an emergency, they kinda know maybe where the weak areas are to look at in the event that we have a power outage. So, I mean, that's all that I'm asking the guys is to consider that.
We need, I mean.
What is the action that
Thank you.
we're?
Yeah.
Yes, thank goodness.
I agree
What
with
is
you.
the action?
So Derek, are you trying to point that we make a motion to keep RS on more of a full-time operation, 40-hour work
Ernie, you
week?
have something?
Yes, sir. Ernie, did you have a question?
Yes, and make it short and simple. I think there is plenty to blame on both sides. When you let RS do this, keep your hands off of them, let them do their thing, and get us back up and running.
So I'll go ahead and make that motion that we go ahead and go to a more full-time contract with RS to keep us up and running.
Thanks, sir.
At times, and we really appreciate you guys coming up here and helping us out.
I'll second that.
All vote.
8 yeas.
Thanks, Otto. Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Number 10, first reading, ordinance 2025-100 authorizing and providing for the insured of combined utility revenue bond at an aggregate principal amount of not to exceed $20 million for the purpose of paying the cost of improvements to electrical system.
Alright, I'll do the reading and then we can get into the details of it. Ordinance number 2025-100, an ordinance authorizing and providing for the issuance of combined utility revenue bonds series 2025 of the city of Falls City, Nebraska, in the aggregate principal amount of not to exceed $20 million for the purpose of paying the costs of improvements to the electric system of the city, funding a debt service reserve fund, and paying costs of issuance, directing the application of the proceeds of said bonds, prescribing the form and certain terms and details of said bonds. Bonds, and authorizing the officers of the city to set certain terms and details of said bonds. Pledging and hypothetically hitting the revenue and earnings of the sewer, water, gas, and electric systems owned by the city for the payment of said bonds and interest thereon, establishing the terms upon which additional bonds of equal lien upon revenues may be issued, entering into a contract on behalf of the city with the owners of said bonds, selling the bonds and authorizing the delivery of the bonds to the purchaser, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
I take it you didn't write that, did you?
No, Gilmore and Bell wrote that.
I thought the cadence knew exactly what it was.
Yeah, Gilmore and Bell wrote that, but, essentially we had the resolution a while back for the Energy Forward project to look at how we can fund that component. So we kind of drafted into reports. We got Brad Slaughter, with First National here, with us too, to kind of talk through some of those pieces. But essentially we have $15 million grant with DED. We need to show a commitment of dollars to get that 1-to-1. Our project's feasibility study shows 30 to 40 million with a 50% contingency built into that. So ideally we'd look at a $20 million bond. That's kind of cover the, kind of the mid-range of that, so that gives us $35 million overall to get a transmission project going. If it's less than that, depending on how we design it, how this council and board of public works goes through the scenario of what we wanna do with reliability, how, you know, strength we wanna build it, or how we wanna build that transmission line. If it's less dollars, we don't need to do anything. If we end up saying, well, it's gonna be more, it's gonna be a $40 million project, then we're gonna have a $5 million gap there that we're gonna have to deal with. Look at moving along. There's some basic planning on how we bond. Our electric and our gas are revenue generating entities, so they bond based upon the revenue. So, it's not like you're, paving and sewer water, where you can, general obligation bonds. These go through the revenues. You gotta show the revenues there to have that offsetting, component. So there are additional dollars out there that we can have identified, whether or not they'll be viable for that repayment. Obviously, Citronic, if they come to fruition, verbally committed, to match dollars. It's not written in paper, so not guaranteed until you see it. Building transmission also has TAR and 40.9 credits, so depending on how that's structured and SPP review, you can get those dollars back. It's meant for that specific purpose. Essentially, municipalities, smaller entities that need to build transmission can get that recovered over time through pushing power through that line, and getting credits off the transmission cost, up to the dollars amount you put in. So, the $15 million grant would be excluded from that. It'd be any out-of-pocket that you would have. This ordinance essentially will get us the legwork we would need to get submitted to DED to meet their milestone 1 requirement, which is saying, right, we're committed, we got a plan, we got the dollars scheduled to come in, and they will write their $15 million check to the city of Falls City, and we will put it in that reserve fund, to set and bank on that and park it. As you need bond revenue coming in, those dollars parked can help offset that interest rate at the same time. So we'll look at how we can invest that opportunity at that point in time, those extra $15 million to help offset that plan. So we're looking at a 3-year bonding period, or 3-year kind of tranches. So ideally we keep it, and Greg can explain a little bit more if I screw it up. Essentially keeping it at bank qualified, so we don't have to go out and get bond rating with the city. We've historically kept bank qualified, so under 10 million a year, for each fiscal. So, and there's a spend down component on it at the same time, so you have to spend so much dollars when you get the bond dollars in. So we have to plan that accordingly with how the project progresses also. So, preliminarily what we're looking at is a 3-year period, run a series in 26, a series in 27, and a series in 28. Ideally, you're in construction by that time, and you'd be done by hopefully 2030 for that construction period of that project. So that'd be your 20 million overall, at 7.3, and a 6.3. Now, depending on that project, you could run those tranches less, depending on what you want to do for design when it gets to that point. But right now, we've got to hone in, like we have the feasibility piece, we need to bring in the team to take it to that next step to really define what is the shovel-ready project and navigating the SPP components, the NITS agreements, the AQs, the aggregate studies, all those things that cost us dollars. We do have, the grant agreement does allow us to be retroactive based upon our notice of award date. So we can go back, our costs that we've had with Healy Law and JK Consulting that Board of Public Works have put in place to get us to this point are all recoverable through this component. Yeah.
No, that helps.
Alright, would you like me to step up and kind of run through?
Yeah,
Go
ahead.
through? Okay. Charlie here.
I feel like you took my job.
Yeah, I was gonna say, all of a
honestly.
sudden, you don't need you then.
Hey folks, Brad Slaughter with FNBO Northland Securities. Thanks for having me out tonight. So yes, as Anthony alluded to and explained very well, the idea would be essentially this is an ordinance, your first reading, that would approve us to fund up to $20 million or anything less over several years, however many you would need through construction. Tentatively in discussion with Anthony and city staff, we thought that we'd break it down in 3 separate tranches that would allow you to keep it, as he mentioned, bank qualified. So keep issues less than $10 million in any calendar year. The reason that's a bigger issue for Falls City is, bank qualified paper in current market trades probably about a quarter point lower than if it wasn't bank qualified. So we kind of structure the debt that way to kind of benefit you folks. Also, it decreases, kind of offsets some of your interest rate risk. So you're not borrowing the full 20 million all at one time before you need it, one. So you're paying interest expense when you don't need to. But two, it also diversifies the interest rate environment in which you lock those funds. So if we can kind of defer some of that interest expense, diversify your lock differential in that period over 36 months, 48 months, that'll help you a little bit too. So that's kind of the idea, but that action in front of you, like I said, allows for us to kind of fund that according to direction from city staff and the mayor to sign off on that documentation. Currently, to give kind of a snapshot of where it is, everything's extremely volatile, as you've probably seen the last several weeks, but realistically, what we would plan to do is not rate your bonds. As Anthony mentioned, we're not gonna rate them, just for the sole fact that a Moody's or S&P would view, they don't see very many towns this size that would do a project this size that would then kind of rate it. They're used to school districts or larger county issues. So what we would do in today's current market is probably insure the bonds, which this ordinance allows for, and that would benefit the city at this point in time. I would anticipate your rate, if we were in the market today, probably around 4.6% if we were out 20-year money. So still, pretty competitive. The insurance piece helps dramatically. This ordinance, however, will allow us to ebb and flow. So if it makes sense down the road to try to rate it, we can. If it makes sense to do it non-rated, we can do that. If it makes sense to not insure it, we can. So this kind of gets us essentially all the freedom we need moving forward to kind of take advantage of whatever interest rate environment we're in to get you the lowest rate is essentially the idea.
What's the call term on these? And I mean, are they all separate?
It'd be 5 years for each.
Okay.
Yep, 5 years. So if we tried to decrease the call shorter, yields will tick up, especially with how volatile things are right now. It hurt. A lot of that piece is too, if we're biting off chunks of 7 or 8 million, we're gonna have to do a 5-year call.
But I mean, really, it's gonna give us good interest rate, diversification, because we'll have this first 3 years and we'll only have 2 years sitting, and then we could call the first one if we wanted
Correct.
to.
Correct. And, as Anthony mentioned too, you're gonna be able to invest those funds until you spend them down, essentially. Not gonna have the grant money, but I mean, with some of that, when we get your tranche for 7-8 million, if you're spending it down to the $2.5 million or $1 million a month, it'll take you a little while before you have that full carry on that 4.6%. So that would be the idea, is kind of just stay in touch as you're running through cash flow, through construction of the project to see what's advantageous. And we'll continue to monitor rates, kind of keep updated, and Derek, you know that better than anybody, but yeah, kind of keep an idea on market conditions, where we're at. The benefit right now is that the city's a great credit, and there's just not that much bank qualified Nebraska paper in the marketplace. So if you had to access something sooner than you initially anticipated, it's not a bad time to do it. Any other questions?
Thank you, Brad.
Oh, absolutely, great to see you, Brad. Thanks for having me out tonight, appreciate it.
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance.
Second.
All vote.
Hey, James?
Number 11, discussion and action. Resolution authorizing a contract amendment with Miller and Associates for engineering services related to the DR-4822 declared disaster, and authorizing city staff to request services and coordinate with FEMA and NEMA, Public Works Director Trevor Campbell.
I can take it, Trevor. So this is for the water main project that was, or the water main transmission that's over the river. So what we wanna do is, we've been working under the existing contract that we had with Miller, for the scope of work of the construction. We just kinda tag that on. This provides a more detailed scope amendment that we can utilize to get to FEMA and NEMA for that contract amount to insurance reimbursement when we go forward with the rest of the disaster pieces. So kind of listed out the scope. The first task is assist with that evaluation design and all those components. Then if there's a construction phase, a task B, which is preparing the construction contracts, doing the on-site construction observation and as record drawings, all those components. So there's no associated dollar to it because that project's so fluid, it's almost impossible to really pull that dollar together. We're gonna be, recoverable under the disaster response component. We're 75% recovered, for the, essentially repair, or 25% that we've gotta cover out of our dollars. And then mitigation, it will be likely 100% covered, depending on how we can navigate that. That's kind of how FEMA and NEMA are structured. So there may be some additional reprieve from NEMA, but that is the FEMA dollars, you're a 75-25 for that piece. Now with the projects, the water is silted in, the ground bed's silted in, that's what they're doing really is more engineering to figure out that hydrology piece. Is that gonna continue to silt in over time? So we don't have to go in and actually copper dam the thing and backfill around the pipe. So that's what they're doing now. Typically, most of those dollars are gonna be that study component, the surveying, the engineering, and then a design component for mitigation to ensure that that pipe stays covered. So this just puts it contractually together to meet the requirements of our disaster response agreement with FEMA.
Moving forward, aren't we? Finally getting there.
Motion to approve. Seconded.
I'll vote.
8 yeas?
Well, discussion and action, resolution authorizing the sale of real property and execute the sale documents for the property at 221 West 14th Street.
Alright, I drafted up a resolution for this. We have a vacant lot that we own, down at 14th and Barreda, all the way to the ballpark. Turn that radius when you're going west. The homeowner next to it's inquired with us about the ability to purchase that and bring that within their parcel. They made an offer, so I'm bringing it to council to take a look at. So we had Dunn's office look to see if that was tied up with how that was titled to us, and they have cleared it through their piece, but I don't know if we want it for any other use. How we wanna do it, I drafted up so it is a resolution, but it's just
You don't need it.
essentially a discussion point at this point in time.
No, I just wanna bring it up, I believe at Joan, I think it was through, if I remember right, it's been years ago since we did this, but I think there was a thing through Fall City Rec, we acquired that, got it tore down so we could potentially make that into parking for, cause we have the, what's the park right across?
Grass parking lot.
Yeah, it was gonna be something like that, it's
Promenade
nothing's ever
Promenade.
come of it, promenade, yeah, whatever. So, I mean, it's the cities that can do what they want, but I know that was the initial intention, was for parking or to make that turn easier.
Yeah, we thought about
'Cause
that.
Yeah, I
We thought
mean,
about cutting that corner down. And of course, you do have an easement there too, so.
yeah, I mean, it's, city can, we can do what we want, I just,
Well,
I know that wasn't
we
the
don't
original
need to
intention.
mow it anymore, so.
It's not much of a buildable lot due to the site corner distance. Parks,
You could fit many cars in there either, though, really.
no, there's not a lot, there's quite a bit of grade change in there, we've kinda looked at it, cause there's sidewalks that need repaired. We did the asphalt overlay, we redid the curb and the entrance for that, under that project, and we looked at, something needs to be done with the sidewalks. We either need to invest into it at some point in time and turn it into something if we want, but yeah, you might
We
get,
haven't done it.
you could probably get maybe 7 to 10, or you can't go both sides on it, there's not enough space, and there's not enough, it's gotta be an entrance from the alley only, cause we can't get out onto the street with that corner and having that intersection that close, it's kinda wild.
but we still have sufficient easement if we wanted to cut that corner back, so, we do, okay.
Seems like
Side
reasonable
easement.
offer for an empty lot too.
Yeah, and I'm okay, I just know the
I
intention.
think we're pretty fortunate to get $2,500. Usually our vacant lots we give away for $500.
Yeah, I think for $2,500,
Yeah,
that's fine.
I'll make a motion to approve the sale and purchase of 221 West 14th Street lot.
Second.
I'll vote.
8 yeas?
I wonder if this guy wants to buy any more.
We can come up with some.
Yeah.
Discussion and action, traffic control on McLean Street between East 28th Street and East 35th Street. Councilman Kenny Kelly.
Yeah, Jeff Bailey's been talking about traffic, and like next Saturday, he sat out there and counted 52 cars going by. He said the average speed was probably 40 to 45 miles an hour. We talked about this before, the stop signs, but if we put speed limit signs up, like we talked about, I'd just like to do that for him, so we can kind of control the speed, have somebody that can, way to do it.
How are you gonna control it? There's
Well, I
lighting,
know, I mean, you know, I'm just.
Is there a speed limit sign from 25th Street to 28th Street?
Not very many.
There's one.
There's
Only one.
There's one though.
There's one out there.
There's one.
The speed limit signs, I had the street crew go out and just give me a full breakdown of all the signage. So there's a map in there, those are those stop signs removed, and obviously object markers that go, I'm going south to north, object markers around the creek. There's a slow children at play sign, and then about halfway on the west side, there's a speed limit sign that's, would be southbound, and then 3/4 the way north, there's a speed limit
But you're
sign.
north, you're
which would
north
be
of 20,
northbound.
you're north of
That's like at
27th
Perry
Street.
Wilton, or Willowbound's house, there's a stop sign.
Right.
Yeah, they're all
Or,
up in the
speed
north
limit
side, there's no speed limit sign on East 35th coming off the highway. Typically, MUTCD doesn't even have it for, it's just, it's a city street, so most of it you don't post them at all. But normally you'd have it at a transition point for a speed limit, or like when you come off the highway, a change onto that street, that speed limit sign really should be probably on the eastbound, East 35th, off the intersection coming in so far, and then potentially the transition from the gravel to the pavement at East 28th on McLean, you would have one there close to probably where Larry Ritchie's house and stuff is. That would be an option, which we could completely remove those others that are up to the north that may or may not provide any value, because they're 3/4 the way up there, and everyone's already traveling at whatever distance. We could potentially move those or add some in. I don't know how much value those 25 limit ones are where their placement is. They don't meet any standard for replacement.
Well, part of our road improvement plan was to pave that north, east, west. I mean, is signage a part of that? Cause once you go from gravel to pavement, that's probably gonna promote increased speeds, but would that have already been addressed when we redo the roads anyway? Would signage come into play, or is it just resurfacing?
Typically, they'll be removed besides the objects. You don't typically have speed limit signs in your residential areas.
No.
Just around schools, on your emergency routes, your, school zones, you just normally just don't have them. Now, this is a little different area, cause it is a transition to gravel, so that could be something where you.
And there's like 4 or 5 businesses kind of out there, the dog care,
Yeah, I don't know when those speed limit signs were put in, I assume most of that was built from the north, so they probably put them as they were having houses, installed those speed limit signs probably close to the houses as they were getting developed. Now that's.
Most of the people along there have asked me for speed limit signs, but they're all.
We have been
Right.
doing
They
stationary.
probably ain't gonna do no good because.
What'd you say, Jamie?
We've been doing stationary radar since it came up about the last 2 months.
Right.
month and a half.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We're not seeing the speed that's being reported, sporadic, sometimes it's a lot of traffic and then it goes hours with no cars at all, so. But, we're not seeing the speed reported, but we have stopped some, we've been doing some traffic stuff, so make sure it's.
And we've done this before.
Mhm.
It's about the 3rd time now.
Probably.
I don't necessarily think adding signs would help, but maybe like what you were saying, the placement may not necessarily be the most ideal.
Well, and to be right honest, in the neighborhood, we've looked at everything that we have here is north of where the stop signs were. A lot of the speed is picked up exiting town from the concrete to the gravel, not so much coming in. So then that means that you'd have your speed limit signs moved all the way down to like 25th Street if you wanted to roll people down, because once they get out north, I don't think that seems to be Jeff's concern, because a lot of his foot's going the other direction too. Which is what the stop sign is for, is to try and blow them from either direction.
Yeah, but they told me 50 people a day would run it anyway, so.
Or we could just stop grading it and let it washboard, that's what people do.
That's pretty rough, but
it's rough.
I don't know, yeah, you can
I'm
move,
just, Jeff asked me this, that's all
well, you can move some signs around and stuff, but I mean, there is something south of him, there is a speed limiter or no parking sign or something up there, I don't know. this.
But if we're gonna move signs, Kenny, I want you to put a, agenda item to make it change to where you want, just so we can avoid any future sign things, okay?
Well, we'll let them figure, I mean, you know,
But you know what I'm saying, we need to have-
I mean, you proposed it, and you're
Yeah.
the one that brought it to our attention that you
I
put
was
the
thinking
signs
one
there.
right by, put one right by Richie's house, right where the gravel is, the speed limit sign, so maybe they look at that and say, hey, we better slow down instead of speeding as we get out there.
And I'm not being a smart aleck, I just want
I
to
know,
follow.
I know,
I think
we're
I-
good, we're good.
But I think when Bobby Carpenter came in here, his biggest concern was FedEx and UPS. It wasn't so much,
Well, he talked to me a lot about a lot of.
well, I know that, but
Local people wanted to treat up to what he said.
So your basic standards, if you do, would be after the transition of something. So after you leave the let's say you're going northbound on McLean, after you leave the concrete, you go to gravel, at that distance out, you would have a speed limit sign. Same thing from eastbound on 35th. You wouldn't have one going southbound on McLean. You just run your eastbound 35th because it's a curve then coming around.
Make sure you maintain standards.
The easiest thing to do would be to open up the MUTCD and call our Olson engineer that we have on hand and ask them what appropriate signage is and take the engineer's recommendation that we have hired, is what I would.
I like it. Is that a motion?
Second?
That's what we'd be looking for, because
Yeah.
we need to draft it then into a resolution.
I like what he said. Let's do that.
Alright, so we got a motion by Ferguson, utilize
I'll second.
Olson under our superintendent agreement.
Call Kenny, not the mayor.
Who was that second?
Okay.
Second. Thank you.
All vote.
Can we need to vote one way or the other?
Oh, I thought it, I turned it off.
8 yeas?
Move on to 14, discussion and action, resolution authorizes city to access unpaid vacant property registration fees for 1701 Wilson Street.
1710?
It is 1701. Pat called me earlier and pointed that out to me, and then I put it backwards. The resolution is drafted up for 1701, which is the correct address. I think 1710's 4 acres.
I was gonna say, that's mine. I better not be fake, yeah.
Closing on you.
No, I just typoed that when I drafted
I'm like, that's me.
the resolution. So I wrote a report, Josh, you had a lot of questions the last kind of go around, when we had this, so I tried to provide a little more detail, obviously basically what the registration fees were, and then a breakdown of what's been invoiced to date, what's been paid by the owners, what has been sent to lien, and what we would be sending to lien. Essentially what's bolded in my report is what we would be sending to lien. Some of these are paid, and some are not paid and already have a lien filed on them. So that's kind of the timing of that from their original date registered to the 180, the 360, the 540, and we continue on that 180-day schedule until we want to do something with it. I did kind of write in the report, these are our non-compliant ones, so it's ones that haven't went to the land bank or the city didn't get an agreement through our, our demo program or anything to get done. We've capped out the dollars for that housing abatement program. Those are taxpayer dollars, property tax, that's our general fund dollars that we did that with. The initial dollars for that came from ARPA, so we didn't have to use our taxpayer funded money. With that, in the future, something's gonna likely have to be done with them or a plan put together and working with our land bank or isolating budget to deal with what's sitting out there. So right now, we can pretty much just let the liens stack, and we continue to do code enforcement on, the nuisance side of it, the grass and, weeds, trees, all those pieces. But eventually, we're gonna put some dollars to it, average $12,000 a house, you can see how many you're gonna have.
So did the city mow the Berta house? Someone's been mowing it and took the tree out of the yard and everything.
Now, the property owner has done that. We're not doing maintenance on these ones. That's a whole nother process, so if lawn's up, Lindsay does that for us on code enforcement. that goes quicker, that's like a 7-day letter, they have so many days to respond, and if they're non-responsive, it goes in the paper, and there's a whole nother process for those. So this isn't liens for that. If we had to do that, we would have additional dollars that gets pushed in with these registration fees, not necessarily with the registration fees, but under a different deal, saying, hey, we had to mow it under this statutory authority, and here's your bill, you don't pay it, we'll end up leaning your property.
I make a motion to approve the resolution on item 14.
8 yeas,
I didn't hear a second.
4 acres.
Sorry.
Head north on Verada.
Can't leave yet.
Patience.
Tell them it's time to go.
Don't ask so many questions, we'll be done if you do. Discussion and action. Resolution authorizes the city to access unpaid vacant property registration fees for 2101 Burial.
Yep, same thing, we'll kinda just go through all of them.
Motion to
for
approve.
difference.
Second.
All vote?
8 yeas,
Discussion and action. Resolution authorizes the city to access unpaid vacant property registration fees for 1120 Lane.
Motion approved.
Second.
All vote?
8 yeas,
17, resolution, discussion and action, resolution authorizes the city to access unpaid vacant property registration fees for 923 East 11th Street.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All vote?
8 yeas,
18, discussion and action, resolution authorizes the city to access unpaid vacant property registration fees for 410 Fulton Street.
Motion to approve. Second.
All vote?
8 yeas,
19, discussion and action, resolution authorizes the city to access unpaid vacant property registration fees for 920 McLean.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All vote?
8 yeas.
That's the end of the agenda, meeting